Before we begin, allow me to brief you on our online webinar etiquette that we have here in EE. For today, we will have 1 hour to listen to the sharing by our esteemed speaker, Prakash Nair. Thank you so much for being here with us, Prakash. Followed by a Q&A session. So the etiquettes that we have here in EE, first of all, please turn on your video throughout the session because we would like to see all your good looking faces. And please, you can just turn off the HD setting if your connection is unstable, or if you cannot turn on the video, then it's okay if you understand if it's about connection problem. And we would like for everyone to make sure that your microphone is muted. You are automatically muted when a speaker is presenting. Please unmute only if you are speaking. During the sharing, you are muted, okay? So, but you can also use the chat or comment section in Facebook and YouTube if you have any question at any point of the session. If you are uncomfortable of unmuting yourself, you can please feel free to use the chat function. So this is for those who are using Google Meet on computer. If you are looking for the chat function, it's at the bottom, it's at the top right of the screen. You have chat there. This is for mobile phones, anyone using mobile phone. You can see your audio, chat and video as well as any settings there that we need. Okay, so I think it's amazing how people of multidisciplinaries are coming together for this session. We have our district officers, teachers and school leaders, and not to forget, I also have, we noticed that we have lecturers and architects also as drafters and even design students who sign up for the session. For those who are industry, I understand it's very important to truly understand your client, and for those in education, hopefully today's session will be giving some perspective, perhaps a different perspective, because our speaker today is Prakash Nair from Education Design International, based in Florida, USA. Prakash works in the design industry with a passion in improving the education and the kind of students that we would like to graduate. Thank you so much for your time, and without further ado, I would like to invite you, Prakash, to begin sharing. Please welcome.
Thank you, Shaza. It's a pleasure to be here. Big fan of Malaysia. I've been there a few times, and every time I come, it feels like home. So a little better than home, I would say, in terms of the country itself. I mean, talking about India, So I'm just going to jump right in, and I'm sure everybody's going to have an opportunity to ask questions. So I'll try to keep my comments as brief as possible. So I'm going to share my screen here. So I guess everybody can see my screen now? Shaza? Hello?
Yes.
Yes. You can see it, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the topic was redesigning learning spaces, blended learning, but obviously the big shadow hanging over us is COVID. I think Malaysia is in relatively good shape in that regard. Obviously, in the United States, it's a much, much bigger problem. But nobody can take it for granted until there is an actual cure. So we'll be touching upon that as well. But to me, I feel that it's something that we should be looking at as an opportunity rather than as a problem, because it's an opportunity to try to do something different. And I think education, it's time for to do something different for obvious reasons, because the education model we have today is well over 100 years old. One might even say it started in 1875. So it's definitely time to upgrade education, and COVID might be just as good an excuse as any. So just stepping back, I think it's good to have some perspective. So Sugata Mitra says that the purpose of education is for students, obviously, and teachers too, ideally, to be happy, to be healthy, and to be useful. This is the primary purpose of education. So whatever we do, we really need to come back to these three things and see if they are being satisfied, because that's the fundamental goal of education. Now, I got some feedback from Janice and Siaza, and basically, according to some of the surveys done with many of the people who are actually attending today, these are some of the advantages that you felt you had when you went to the online learning model. distance learning model during the quarantine. You learn new technologies. Students were more responsive. I would say that that's not necessarily universally true, but I guess many students were. They were more exposed to online opportunities that they may not have had they been in the classroom. And students were able to access materials on various platforms, saving time and energy. But there was also some challenges, and that was that now you have to repeat what was taught during quarantine to catch up on the syllabus. You're unable to conduct active learning as the standard operating procedures requires. Students have to sit in exam-style seating, and we'll get a little bit to that. And of course, coming back after all the time away, students have low motivation, and there's also lower attendance when they come back to school after having the so-called freedom when they were not in school. It's kind of funny. I was in Dubai once on my way to someplace, I don't even remember where, and I saw a headline of a newspaper, and it says, students celebrate last day of school, and they were all literally jumping for joy, and the photographer captured the students in the air jumping for joy. So my point was, why is it that students are so happy when school is over? I mean, shouldn't they be happy when school starts? So I think that it's a good indication of the quality of education when students are jumping for joy when that's the last day of school. Hopefully students as well as us, we should be spending every day doing things that we love, doing things that we enjoy. There's no reason education should be something that feels like we are taking some bad medicine. Now, the reason I said that things have to change is because the world is changing. We are now in what we call the fourth industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution was the knowledge era when technology and internet became front and center. But the fourth industrial revolution is very different because the evolution of it is very exponential. It's going to grow at a very, very fast pace. Now, the biggest thing driving this revolution is artificial intelligence. And from there, you can see all the other pieces of the puzzle coming together. And these are significantly altering pretty much every industry that we know is going to be altered. In fact, many of them have already started being altered. I mean, robotics is a good one. If you walk into any car factory, you won't see any humans there. Everything is built by robots, right? So that's been happening now for many years. And so this world is going to look very different, unrecognizable to the people sitting in this room, the world in which our children graduate. So the question is, how can we educate them for a world that is so completely and totally different than the world in which we grew up? So at least at a very fundamental basic level, we have to go away from this model called teacher-centered learning. And the reasons are simple, because all the research about education shows that children learn best when they are actively working and learning. I mean, think about anything you want to learn, whether it's to learn to play a piano, whether it's to learn to drive a car, learn to play soccer, any one of these things, or learn to be a cook or a gardener. No matter what it is that you want to do, you have to be able to experience that particular activity. Having somebody talk to you, you can't learn piano by watching some expert pianist. So what happens in school mostly is students are going to school to observe teachers working. That's not a way to learn. There's no research that says that this is a good way to learn. So we need to go to a model called student-centered learning, and we'll talk a little bit about what that's about. The problem is that during before the pandemic, slowly, there had been some progress. And our company, we've been doing work now in 52 countries, and we had seen this gradual movement from teacher-centered learning to the student-centered model. But what happened during COVID is that much of that progress has been wiped away. We're now back to a very teacher-centered learning model. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what is student-centered learning? And you will see how difficult it is to do, especially with social distancing and all that. So student-centered learning has 4 key components. The first component is called personalized learning, which means that every child will have a program that is very specific to their needs, their competence, their ability, their interest, their passion, because not all students in the class are going to go on to do the same thing, right? We all know that if there are 25 students in class, one might go on to become a top chef, one might go on to become a marathon runner, one might go on to become a rocket scientist, and on and on. One might go and become a great musician. and we teach them all the same. So it doesn't make any sense. So what we're saying is the education needs to be personalized. The second is it needs to be competency-based. And what that means is that students should be able to master whatever they are learning. We shouldn't be advancing them to the next level. Just as in a video game, you don't advance to level 3 until you have mastered level 2, right? It's the same thing. In education, we want to make sure students have achieved mastery before they are moving to the next step. The third thing is that learning should be anytime, anywhere. It's not like you learn 45 minutes, a period, bell goes off, and now suddenly you shut your books and science is over. That's not how real learning happens. You should be able to learn anytime, anywhere. And finally, the students should have a voice in what education should be. So these are 4 very, very critical components. Unfortunately, what happened is post-pandemic, when schools started reopening, and I'm showing you some pictures from schools that opened, you can see we went back to a very teacher-centered model where students are essentially sitting, waiting passively to be told what to do. And this is not education. Certainly, this is not learning in the 21st century. So you can see from different countries what the post-pandemic classrooms look like. And I would not be surprised if these pictures match what's happening in Malaysia as well. I haven't actually seen that, but from what I heard and from what I know from Siaza and Janice and others have told me, this seems to be what you're doing as well. France, Italy. So you're not alone. Everybody is doing this sort of very old-fashioned exam format where everybody's sitting distance as if they're waiting to take an exam. Tunisia. And the thing, this is before pandemic, okay? There's nothing to do with the pandemic. But the reason I'm showing you this is to say that the model, fundamental model, has not changed. This is the model that was in place before the COVID came into play. This is what the typical teacher-centered model, the teacher is in charge, the students are all facing the teacher, and they are basically passive for most of the time. They're not actively doing anything. In this classroom, there are very few things that they can do, even if they wanted to. So some classrooms have more space, some classrooms have less space, but at the end of the day, the fundamental model has not changed in over 100 years. So some of these schools are very high-profile schools in some of the most wealthy school districts. This is actually from Boulder Valley in Colorado. It's a very wealthy community. And you can see they're sitting on these cheap plastic chairs. They have these cheap plastic desks, and that's it. And this particular room doesn't even have windows. So any country you go to, the model is fundamentally the same. Now, this model, as I said, is familiar because it's over 100 years old. So we haven't changed, even though, as we know, the world has changed radically and dramatically. We are still educating, and education should be the most forward-thinking of all industries, because we are preparing people for a future, an unknown future. So if there's anything that should be futuristic, it should be education. And education, ironically, is the one field which is the most backward. It hasn't changed in 100 years. So what is the change that we want? We want to go from these traditional methods to these innovative practices. So when it comes to teaching, teachers right now, because they're trapped in the classroom, are teaching solo. We want them to teach as a part of a team. This is very important. And there's a lot of research that shows why team teaching is vastly improves student accomplishment. The work should not be directed by a teacher, as I said. It should be more directed by a student. And I gave you the examples of what that looks like. Subjects should not be taught incrementally, because in real life, you don't encounter science and maths and physics and social studies. You basically encounter them as part of something else. So we need students to see the context when they learn anything. So we need to have more integrated interdisciplinary courses. And basically, the classroom as a unit is an inefficient unit. What we want is students to connect with the vast network of learning opportunities that extend far beyond the classroom. So here's an example of what a non-classroom-based model might look like. This is actually a middle school, and students come in, they do their own thing. They don't have to go into a classroom. They are basically given assignments that they work on independently. And if they need help, the teacher will help them. Until they ask for help, their teacher is not coming. And behind there, you can see places where students can do their own work. If they have to build something, if they want to have a distance learning call, anything, there are places throughout the school for various things that they can do. Just as in an office, we would have those opportunities. But the fundamental model is that learning is student-driven. Now, what happened is during the pandemic, we took the what we call the hierarchical model that is in schools, with the teachers and students having very little autonomy and very little power, and we transferred that model to the online world. Now, in the online world, of course, we have so many different opportunities. So naturally, if you have students sitting at home trying to get on a computer, trying to attend a class through a Zoom meeting or something like that, it's going to be underutilization of an amazing resource that's there. So this has been a big problem. That's why a lot of, I don't know about Malaysia, but in the United States, this online learning, distance learning was an abject failure. It has not worked well at all. So what we're saying is that really we need to have the school look more like the outside network and not the other way around. Because the network outside school has tremendous potential, tremendous learning opportunities. We want to bring those learning opportunities into the school itself. And I can talk to you about how that might happen. So we are going to look quickly at the next 12 to 18 months. Hopefully by then COVID will be gone. And then after that, what happens as well. So the blended model that we were talking about really means that a physical school becomes part-time, or it could even be full-time, it doesn't matter. But the world outside school becomes an integral part of the whole schooling experience. That means that we are acknowledging that learning is everywhere. Learning has escaped the boundaries of the school building. That means you should not duplicate in the online world anything that you're doing in the physical school. There's no need to do that because the online world has so many more rich opportunities. And the mistake that was made during the distance learning is that we took the physical school, we literally tried to make a duplicate of that in the online world, and that makes no sense at all. That's kind of like buying a car and then attaching a horse to it, because that's what we are used to, so what I'm saying is no duplication. Second is that teachers and students don't all have to be in the same room at the same time. Teachers can WhatsApp, they can do text messages, they can do so many ways of communicating with their students, or they can meet at a certain designated time. Students can meet a teacher, talk to them for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, ask whatever questions. 25 or 30 students don't have to be sitting there scratching their head while one student is asking a question. It has to be personalized. This is a beautiful opportunity when you're in the online blended model. Students can actually learn what is important for them. The curriculum can be personalized. Their own learning program can be personalized. Parents can now become more engaged. It's much easier for a parent to come to the computer and talk to the teacher that way than have to physically come to the school. So now you're going to get more parent engagement. There can be a lot of additional help beyond the traditional academic help that children need that really stands in the way of their learning. So mental health professionals and others can now support students virtually. Companies can provide learning. For example, someone wants to learn a guitar, there can be some local guitar instructor that's prepared to come online and teach. An architect like me might be the one you tap to teach somebody about architecture. But the point I need to make is that when these people are teaching this, it's not like the student is just staring at the computer, right? They are learning how to play the guitar. Someone might teach them how to grow vegetables, so then they go out and plant vegetables and on and on. So the lessons don't have to be all in front of a computer. And then, of course, the mentors don't have to be local. They can be from anywhere in the world. And then why not partner with other schools? So the online world gives you an opportunity for schools to share resources. Some schools may be really, really good at science, and other schools might have some amazing environmental programs. So now they can share that. And finally, the online world offers opportunities for industries to affiliate with the education world and offer courses, certificates, so that students can now graduate from high school with the skills that they can be immediately hired into the real world, because now they're gaining skills that the industry actually wants. Now, the only difference between the model I just showed you and this one is that if you do all the things that I'm talking about, then the physical school, the purpose is going to be different, because you don't have to think about it as the one and only place where real learning happens, because you can do a lot of the learning outside school. That means the physical school needs to be repurposed to do things that you could not be doing outside school. That's a place where you have the face-to-face contact with your teachers, with your friends, the social learning, the emotional learning, all of that can happen. So for that, you need the physical school to look different. So now I'm going to show you what that might look like. Now, this is not what I'm talking about. This is the traditional model where the teachers are completely in charge of decorating their room. And you can see when you put the teacher in charge, this is what it looks like. Now, if this was your house, I'm sure you wouldn't want to live here. Certainly, you don't want to spend every day of your life in a place like this. It is so crowded, it's so cluttered, and it's really not a healthy place by any stretch of the imagination. All the research shows that this kind of environments are really not healthy for children. So imagine this kind of space. This is something that we call an atelier, a studio, and it's a multi-age studio, and it's also a multidisciplinary studio. If you look at this space, there's water, there's art materials, you can teach science, you can teach music. As you can see, there's a piano and a guitar and a piano, and on and on and on. So this is not a subject-based room. It is an activity-based room in which a multiplicity of different activities can happen. But it's also very zen. It's very calm. It's very soothing to be in a place like this. So what do we want children to do, actually? This is the key question. Whether it's pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, it doesn't matter. What do we actually want them to do? So we've come up with this list of 20 modalities. I'll show you 10 here and 10 on the next slide. So these are the 20 things we actually want children to do. Now, lectures, you can see part of it, right? But we don't want the lecture to dominate. We want that to maybe be 5% or 10% at the most of the students' time. The rest of the time, they should be doing other things, like they should be doing the presentations. They should be doing research on the internet. They should be learning with mobile technologies. They should be in seminars. They should be learning through performance, collaborating, right? They should be learning through nature. They should be doing artwork. They should be learning distance learning, like I said, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Storytelling, play, of course, project-based learning, and all that. So you can see that we want to encourage these 20 modalities of learning to happen. Now, if you go back and look at a traditional classroom, you can see how limiting that space is, how the teachers are forced to make the lessons so simple that almost none of these 20 modalities are really happening there. Most of what's happening is this modality, the lecture modality, and maybe the students can do some presentations in front of the room, but that's about it. So what we're saying is this model, this individually owned rooms model, where the teacher is in a room with a desk and the students are sitting in the classroom, and there's a hallway, either an open or a closed hallway outside. None of the key things that we want to happen can happen. You can't do teacher collaboration. You can't do proper pedagogy. You can't have an integrated curriculum. The sense of community is, you're trapped with a bunch of students, and that's your community. So what we're saying is this: if you look at this as the hardware and the bottom as a software, you cannot run 21st century software in 20th century hardware. It's as simple as that. If I gave you a computer from 1982, you will not be able to run today's programs. You will not be able to get on the internet. You will not be able to watch a YouTube video. You couldn't do pretty much anything that we do today. You wouldn't do with an Apple IIe from 1982. Whereas this is not your 1982. This is an 1875 model. So obviously, you can't expect 21st century education to happen properly in a 20th century model. So what we have designed in our schools is a model called Learning Community, where yes, you have some classroom type spaces, but they open up to this common area. The teachers, as you can see, now work as a team. Remember, I talked to you earlier about team collaboration. And then there's quiet areas, there's active areas, there's places for media, there's wet and messy spaces, and there's always connections to the outside. There's also breakout areas. And if you design a space like this, then of course the teachers can collaborate more, the pedagogy becomes student directed, the curriculum becomes integrated, and of course sense of community is now the entire community. So if there are 100 students or 150 students here, they can all get to know each other personally by name, and each student can have a personalized learning program in a place like this. So I'm going to show you some images of what that might look like and how some existing schools can be converted to become learning communities. So here's a school. This was in Germany, and this was an existing school, a Cells and Bell school, we call it, and it was transformed to look like this. Now, this is what a learning community looks like. This was actually a computer lab in a school in Florida that we converted to look like this. This is what we call an innovation lab. So in this lab, students are sitting in front of a computer. There's a teacher in front of the room. They're all doing the same thing at the same time in the same way. Whereas here, they're working collaboratively. They are in charge of their own learning. They're using technology, and the teachers are not actually doing much. Most of the work is being done by the students. And here's a before of what the library would look like. A library is another unnecessary space in today's world. We can decentralize the resources, as you can see, books, and we can have different kind of learning, active learning happen. So this is the same space that we converted to look like this. Or this one, hallways, a lot of wasted space in schools. And what we're saying is we can recapture the space to make it look like that in this case. Or this space can be converted to look like this. Now, if you can see, this teacher is one who has been teaching very traditionally for 25 or 30 years, and that's his so-called classroom, but he doesn't teach there. I mean, he spends a couple of minutes instructing students, and then they all come out into the common area. As you can see, there's no corridors. And then the students are basically directing themselves. And if any student needs extra help, the teacher's there to give one-on-one guidance, which you cannot do in a classroom because now you're going to disturb all the rest of the students. So again, these are some of the more progressive, good schools that we work with who already have a good idea about what they want. But even then, you can see the environment is really not such a great place for them to be. And what we did is we converted this to this. We converted this space to this space. This space, this is actually a school in Florida. It's actually a government school converted to look like that. These are some other additional space of what these learning communities can look like. And it applies to any age group. These are 3- and 4-year-olds, and they are thriving in a learning community model. You can see there's a lot of connections to the outside, which again in Malaysia, I think it's a thing that we should encourage. And the teachers, as you can see, work together as a team. And again, this is a great example of what we talk about student-centered learning. You see that the students are not all doing the same thing at the same time. There is no great advantage to having 25 or 30 students sit in attention and raise their hands exactly when they're instructed and do exactly what the teacher is saying. This is not what real learning looks like. This is what real learning looks like. And that same example for higher students. This is high school students. This is one of the schools we designed in Colorado. But as you can see, there is no teacher here. The students are essentially completely self-directed, doing their own thing. They have been given assignments and they're working on them. And as you can see, they're working individually, they're working in small groups, they're working in different kinds of furniture. And it's a very collaborative, very self-managed environment. So the idea that students cannot manage themselves is been disproven time and time and time again. We also have apps that take all of this into account, how we can monitor the different kinds of learning that's going on. I don't want to get too much into it, but I just want to say that this stuff is actually fully researched. So there are ways to measure the quality of the learning that's happening in these kinds of spaces. Now, there was a question about what happens when you don't have all kinds of technology. So the point is that a lot of the things that I'm talking about can happen outside. And the outside learning can be exceptionally powerful because students are able to connect with nature, and they are able to think on their feet and solve problems without the aid of the normal technologies, looking at Google or whatever. So here are some examples of what outdoor learning might look like. This is actually a vegetable garden right next door to where I live at a school. So here are some examples of that. So now it's interesting, this outdoor learning experiment started with the last pandemic about 100 years ago. In 1906, there was a pandemic, tuberculosis pandemic in the United States. And the students could not sit inside because it was not healthy. So they sat outside. This is in the exceptionally cold, and that's a river back there. And this is actually a ferry. So they were learning on a ferry outdoors. Of course, I don't want this. I don't want them to just bring the classroom outside because that's completely wasting the opportunities of outside, right? So I would like to design school grounds so that every inch of space is used for learning in some way. This is actually in Mumbai, which is a very similar weather as Malaysia. And you can see how they just use the outside with some in the balcony, and that becomes the extension of the art room that they have. Or this is children learning to play the drums outside, or play chess, or just go out and work with technology. Doesn't matter. You can see that all we have is a little shade structure up there and a little deck. Or just sit outside, either whether it's eating lunch, whether it's playing games, whether it's doing an assignment, whether it's doing art, doesn't matter. A lot of things you can do outside. Here's students doing art. This is school in India. Here's tree planting, children being exposed to that. This actually is my daughter who does this work in schools. Here's a little amphitheater outside. These are kids who are actually doing a Shakespeare play outdoors. Again, very inexpensive infrastructure to do things like this. And of course, in places like Malaysia, I would definitely recommend some kind of shading device. This is in New York in the springtime. It's beautiful. You don't always need shade. Or playful structures like this. This is Mother Goose shoe, and children love it. And they come here, they read, they play. So, we can make places for young children very playful and fun for them, because school and learning does not have to be a chore. It can be a fun activity. There's no reason why you can't do physical activities that are healthy, so that you're in touch with nutrition and health while you're doing all the other things. And beyond the outdoors, for those people who had the questions about the school not having enough resources, you have to look around in your own communities. There are many things that happen in your community that you may or may not even be aware of, and the investments can be in students being taken out so that they are enjoying. This happens to a children's museum. So schooling doesn't all have to happen in a classroom. There's lots of community resources that you can take them out to. This is an art museum where children are actually given opportunities to do artwork. So, and mingle with students from other parts of the community as well, So here they're appreciating art at a very, very early age, or go to a local aquarium. So whatever resources that any community has, this can all become part of school, particularly now with the pandemic, and you cannot have all the students in the school at the same time. It's a good opportunity to take them outside. Let them explore the city. In fact, in New York, there was actually a school, they call it City as School. And right now they're doing that in other countries as well. So I think that we have to think beyond learning happening only in the bounds of a classroom. It can happen in a park, as I say, it can happen in an aquarium, it can happen on the beach. There are so many different places where learning can happen. So with that, I'm going to do this last thing, which is to say that if you think about the classroom, it has a very, very limited potential in terms of what you can do with it. I don't know if you can even see can you see the bottom of my screen? So the score for the classroom is like 1. The online classroom is like 2, and the blended model is 10.5, and the hybrid model is 19. In fact, if I go here, you can see this. So what I'm saying is that the full-fledged school is probably going to come into play around 2022 when the pandemic is over. But even if it comes into play, it's going to be a 1.5. And the reason for the score is that I'm talking about all the different things that I want you to do. Remember, I talked about the 20 modalities? Whereas the classroom and the online classroom that we were doing now, what is currently happening is still not that good. It's only a 2.5. Whereas the blended model that I talked to you about, that's my start sign here, will give you a score of 10.5 without doing any construction, without doing any changes to your existing building. And if you go to the hybrid model, where you're actually doing some changes to the building, and you're also taking the students out and doing all the other things, you can raise the score all the way up to 19. So what I'm saying is that even with no construction, you can go all the way up to a 10.5, or even a little higher if you can take the students out. And so why would we ever go back to this model of school, which is a 1.5, which is kind of where we are trapped right now? So I guess that's about it. I'm going to stop this, and here were some of the questions, but I'm going to have Janice and Shaza and others ask me the questions, and then I'll answer those specifically. I think I may have addressed some of these questions. So I can stop sharing here, and then, yes, get back to the, so I'm back, right?
Thank you so much, Prakash, for sharing the amazing design of learning space that you have shown. Other than the potential of students, you are on the potential of the spaces, which reminds me of a quote by Gurpreet Singh, the CEO of Mereka, a maker lab in Malaysia, which provides access for students to design and be creative. So yeah, he said, what's bigger of a waste than a waste of potential?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yes, and as we can see from the designs, most of the public schools design in Malaysia, if I can share, greatly depends on the ministry with limited budget. So what will be your advice, the first steps for teachers to take for them to ensure that they could provide better learning space, or like to apply any of the 20 learning modalities?
Yeah,
for
I
us.
would say, yeah, I would say that really this is a problem that needs to be addressed at a higher level than the teacher,
Yes.
ideally, right? But if I'm a teacher, there's one thing I can do, one simple thing, and I'll give you a kind of a very kind of a strange example. There was a teacher who was being very popular because his students were doing exceptionally well on social studies. They were periodically getting the best scores in the whole state. And they were saying, what is this great teacher's ability? And he was in a classroom, so he didn't have all of the facilities I'm talking about. So when they get to the class, they found the teacher would write some kind of assignment for the day on the board and then just read a newspaper for the rest of the period. That's it. This is the teaching. So basically, the students had to look at each other and say, what do we do? What do we do? And then they figured it out, Even when my children were growing up, they would ask me for help with homework, and I would be busy, and I would say, can you wait for 10 minutes or 15 minutes? I'll come. I'll definitely help you with the homework after that. And then I come back in 10, 15 minutes. They said, no, it's fine. We don't need your help. We figured it out, right? So the thing is, with children, you need to give them an opportunity to make the mistakes, figure it out, struggle, and talk to each other and solve things. So even that simple change of pedagogy where the teacher steps back and lets the students do more, challenges them, has to have them, ask the big questions. So rather than be so focused on content and just delivering the content, make sure that the students are taking charge and say, yeah, you have to pass the exam, but I'm going to leave it in your hands. Let's see what you guys can do, right? Yeah, maybe one or two students might need extra help, but don't act as if all 30 students are cut from the same cloth and that you have to teach the whole class all the time. And of course, finally, I want to also say that's the reason I gave you the outdoors. So to the extent you have the authority, yeah, go outside if you can, But these things need help from the principal and others. I'm just talking earlier only about what a teacher can do.
Yes. So to also share, just recently, less than 24 hours ago, our National Security Council has announced that the schools will be allowed to conduct co-curricular activities and outside classroom activities. So I guess what teachers can do, we can take the ideas or the concept of this physical or blended learning into our teaching once we can do that. Once we have the chance to make a change, we can make a change.
Yes.
It's really up to us whether we want to move away from the traditional um, style of teaching, or we
Yeah.
would like to infuse even a little, even as little as you said. We ask them to do flip classroom. For example, you give them a piece of news for them to read first before
Yeah.
they come into classroom. That is one way of having blended learning. It's one way of infusing technology, maybe not directly, but from reading the news which was produced through technology. So that's
hmm
something that can also do. I guess you have also shared how the we should shift our perspective on the need to ensure that we have technology, that we have plugs, plug points, or even cables in the classroom in order to conduct a
Yeah.
blended learning.
Well, that's
Yes.
true. But as I said, I think a lot of the people that are doing well in life were challenged when they were younger. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that there's a direct correlation between how much money you spend on technology and how successful the students are going to be. This is also a function of motivation. How motivated children are. I mean, they have found that students with just one computer can train up to 100 students in India. There was that Sugata Mitra's experiment. So it's not. We have to understand that this is a philosophy. This is how we think about children and realize that they are very creative and that we need to encourage that creativity rather than keep trying to force some kind of a old-fashioned curriculum into their head so that they can pass an exam. This is not what
Mhm.
real life is about, passing exams. They can pass the exam if they're motivated, because now they're learning deep learning and they're going to be motivated to pass exam, but not because you trap them in a classroom and kept hammering them with information.
Yes. We have here question from um, this one is MOE. Hi, Mr. Prakash. So I've read the questions. It's something that we just talked before this.
Mhm.
Um, many teachers are maybe feeling helpless if they felt like there's nothing that they can do. But I guess it all goes back to what kind of students we want to graduate and how far do we want that to happen, for us to maybe create a community that believe in the same vision to change how we learn, how we teach our students
Right.
as well.
Well, everybody has authority and power within their own sphere
Yes.
of influence. The question is, what are you doing with that? And
Mhm.
then you can complain about the others. And if you are trying to do the right thing, maybe you can get more partners to come with you. Maybe you can get a net teacher who's next door to be a partner and figure things out together. But really, you can't just say the system is broken. I'm trapped. I can't do anything. Everybody can do
Yeah.
something, within their authority. When I started my own career, I gave up a government job to start my company. I realized that the schools were not working, but I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any business experience. I worked as a bureaucrat most of my life, and suddenly I started my own company. But because the ideas were so powerful, I was able to get people to buy into it. And little by little, over 20 years, that where practice has expanded to 52 countries. So everything starts with an idea,
Yes.
whether you're one teacher or whether one student, it doesn't matter. People have power. They need to try to do what they can with that. But that said, I really hope that the Ministry of Education and others are hearing this message and giving
Mhm.
teachers the help they need, the professional development they need, seriously thinking about the curriculum and all these other things and how we can prepare our children to be successful, because ultimately a country's success depends on the education system,
Yes.
in today's world.
Definitely.
If otherwise, you're going to fall behind. You're going to become quickly a third world country. It's ultimately completely comes down to education. So this is the best investment a country can make in its education and in its future, in its children. The children are the future of every country. They are the ones we should be investing in.
True. When you say about investment, is at the end of the day, really, it's all about investing in something that you believe in, and
Right.
we have to believe in the idea if something is possible to happen. And you also mentioned that everyone has a role to play, and you mentioned about the parental engagement. Even here in Evolution, we believe in getting engaged, the
Mhm.
parents engaged in shifting our education. Maybe Mel, would you like to share um, the the importance of having the parents engage
Yeah.
in changing how
Yeah.
we see education?
I think so, because again, parents have the impression that unless children are suffering, they're not learning. I mean, I've actually had parents say, "Look, my child is having too much fun. It looks like he's not learning anything." So they have this impression that unless learning has to be difficult and learning has to be a problem, children have to complain. No, it doesn't have to be like that. The more children enjoy, the more passionate they're going to be, and the more engaged they are, the more creative they're going to be. So this is something that parents have to get over, because they are thinking about education from their perspective, how they were educated. They say, look at me, I'm successful. I went to a traditional school. Well, we say, yeah, but would you put your grandfather, would you send your child to a hospital that was treating your great grandfather? If you had a modern hospital, would you tell them to treat them like that way? No, because in every other endeavor in your life, you want something modern, right? You don't drive a car that was built 100 years ago. Why is it when it comes to your child's education, you want that education to look like your education, right? So the reality is that most parents, when they see the truth and see how much more productive children are going to be and how much more creative and how much happier, then they will come around. The problem is most people don't know this. This is such a big uh, lie, in a way, that has been sold to billions of children around the world and parents, that they think this is the right thing to do, because it's such a scale thing. It is very hard to change something that's happening at that scale. The pictures I showed you, I could be from any country. I can show you pictures from, you won't even be able to tell me which country it is, because this is what education looks like everywhere. And so people are comforted. It's like if you're crossing a street and there are 100 people with you, you feel comforted. But if there's a truck coming down the street, it doesn't matter if there are 100 people or 1,000 people. You're all going to get killed. You know what I'm saying? So there's no comfort in knowing that we are all doing the wrong thing. Doesn't matter if it's only 1% of the people are doing the right thing. I think we as adults have an obligation to our children to do what's good for them. You know.
Thank you, Prakash. So another sharing by Azlan. This Azlan said that he shared his experience bringing students out, and this may seem different to the teachers in school, which has caused some disagreement. I guess this goes back to team teaching, which also were able to bring different experience for the students within the learning space. So as you said, learning space shouldn't just be confined to a classroom. It can be the whole school, it can even be outside of school.
Right.
So that's something that maybe we can do as teachers, which is to work together, to give different experience
Well,
for
one,
the
I'll tell you one. I agree with that the person, Janice, and that I think Aslan, who said that people may not allow you to go out, because this is not the policy. They are afraid that children will get hurt, whatever, right? Those kinds of decisions may have to be made at the school level. But let's say you're a teacher and you have some horrible furniture, right? Why can't you make a project which basically says, okay, we are going to reach out to the community to see if we can get better furniture for our classroom, just for this one room, right? And let's, maybe parents are donating an old couch or some comfortable cushion chairs, or a nice carpet or whatever, and basically get permission from the principal just to redecorate the classroom with nice comfortable seating. Every student doesn't have to have a chair, because the last thing you want is everybody to sit. I mean, they say sitting is the new smoking, and if you look at the research, it's exceptionally unhealthy to sit, very unhealthy, more unhealthy for children than it is for adults. So you don't need, if there are 30 students in a class, you don't need 30 chairs. They don't all have to be sitting on chairs. They can be sitting on stools, on couches, on cushioned surfaces, on windowsills, on anything. So teachers and students can make that a project, and that project will have mathematics in it. That project will have science in it. That project will have economics in it, and so many other things that the children are learning just by redecorating their own classroom, right? So I'm just saying, within your power that you have, there's still a lot that you can do.
So Nadia also brought up an issue there, like redesigning teacher training, such that they engage with
Yeah.
collaborative and hybrid learning in their own, like during their own training before coming to school. That's also something. Maybe Nadia, would you like
Yeah. Yeah,
explain
yeah.
more?
I would definitely say that's important. Nadia, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was
That's
thinking
okay.
that when Mr. Azlan shared that the teachers sometimes, I think in Malaysia, being a teacher myself a long time ago, you're looked upon kind of weirdly if you do something different in your classroom. But one of the reasons that I felt that was because when the teachers were trained, they were trained using this chalk and talk kind of method.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if we can start thinking of the many different levels that need to change in order to change the system, it's not only if Miss Tioham pointed out, if it's only the teachers who are trying to change, then they will feel frustrated. But if the different levels are all trying to change simultaneously, perhaps
Right.
we'll get there faster. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that.
Yes, also I feel like when we say starting small, it can be big if we would like to look at how building education revolution in Australia, which happens after the pandemic in 2008, which was 12 years ago. So what happened was, after the pandemic, the government, if I can share a bit, the government actually encouraged the redesigning of the physical schools by actually including the local builders to
Hmm.
also increase their economy after the pandemic. Maybe this is also something. Maybe this is the next step that Malaysians could take lessons from. I mean,
Yeah.
like to maybe let's do something. We can do something actually if we work together. If you're talking about the physical learning spaces.
Yeah. I can actually share one thing which might be helpful, and I'll actually send this so you can share this with everybody in the who has attended, and I'll just share this with you. One second. Um, can you see my screen now? Right. So basically, there are 4 levels there's a limited student-centered learning, there's emergent student-centered learning, intermediate student-centered learning, and high-level student-centered learning, right? So there are 4 categories. There's personalized learning, there is competency-based education, there's anytime, anywhere learning, and there's student-owned learning, right? So what happens is that you might be here limited, right? But you could just start by going to there's just emergent, just one baby step. And then you can think about the intermediate, and then you can think about high level. You don't have to jump from here all the way to the high level. You know what I'm saying? So there are small steps that teachers and students and parents and principals can do to go from here to the ideal, which will be at the end here in all these 4 categories, you know, in competency based, in anytime, anywhere, in student-owned learning, you know. All of this doesn't have to happen overnight. So when you do the professional development, you are talking about having a plan, a strategy, where you start where you are honest about assessing your place, that becomes your benchmark, and then you build from there to wherever you want to go.
Yeah, Prakash, can I just add something?
Sure.
Yeah, I think I really like a comment from Aslan, where he says about carrying out a pilot project, and I think that's something that he's included in your blended model, where you included working with local companies, you know. So I think, just to share with you, I think we have audiences from the various level of the education ecosystem in Malaysia. We have representatives from the state, from the district, and even at the ministry level. And I think this is something I just want to share with the individuals who are here, that I think the Malaysian Education Blueprint and also the ministry really encourages collaboration with companies or even any other sectors to allow to improve learning. So this is something, a project that Aslan says that if you want to do this as a pilot project, I think the policy through the policy that the ministry has set actually allows schools and also teachers to embark on such a to explore such a project. So I think I have known of a district in Sabah who actually set up their own what they call like a community hub that explores all these 21st century learning on their own initiative, exploring work also with trying to collaborate with various local companies and also sectors. So I just want to encourage individuals, teachers, or district officers. Sometimes we don't need to wait for people at the top or at the ministry level to give that directive for us to embark on such an initiative. I think if there is a need within your state, within your district, and for a need to design spaces, for the need to train your teachers in such what you call this learning, I think that is possible because the ministry allows that through the community and public-private partnership pillar. So I think for those who are wanting, like, how can I do this as a pilot project? How can I do this? I think the policy allows that, and I think that shouldn't stop ideation from happening, since the policy has already given that permission. Yeah, so that's something I just want to share with the audiences here. Yeah, thank you.
Melissa, I'm glad you said it. I'm going to say one more thing, and Saiza, I know you have to end it at that point, that this idea is an excellent idea. We call them Pathfinder projects. And these are holistic projects where the change includes all the pieces, includes a small piece of curriculum, it includes professional development, it includes a space, it includes parent involvement, but it's done at a very small scale. And it's called for proof of concept. And we also have great measures so we can benchmark the old and the new, and we can see them happening side by side, right? So now you can provide the proof of concept, and if it works, then you scale it up at a manageable scale, depending on how much funds you have and how much enthusiasm there is and how successful you are. And then you can make the changes too as you need as you scale up the program. This is what we actually do almost all the time when we work with existing schools. We start with a small pilot project, we call it Pathfinder, and then from there we scale it up. And that's a much more realistic way to do this.
I think that's a fantastic idea. You start from the ground and to show something that works on the ground before you escalate it to the people at the top. So I really love the idea, Aslan. Aslan, I think if you really want to do this as a pilot project, I think we will share. I think you can look up Prakash's organization up on Facebook and see how you can connect your state and also your district to see how we can work together to bring your project if you have any ideas on this. Because I know there are a few schools in Sabah and also the district is really supportive for such initiatives, and we hope to carry out such work with them also. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Something that I would also like to share, if anyone would like to test out how we can take the concept from the 20 modalities. I do have some ideas, but maybe not for this session. Don't know if you would like to have another session on how we can have 21st century learning within a traditional classroom. I hope from the discussion today, we are inspired to try out something new, and also maybe this could also influence the people in power to reallocate their budget in the future in school spaces to facilitate these various modalities of learning for our students. So anyone else have any other questions maybe?
Well, I encourage you to continue to research this. Everything that I said is freely available online, and continue to explore how this can be not just talk, but action.
Okay.
That should be the
Yes,
difference. Otherwise, these kinds of webinars are only helpful if people take these ideas and then want to explore further and then do something, even if it's a small thing. Start somewhere.
We start small
Yeah.
for something big in the future.
Exactly.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Prakash,
Thank you.
for
My
your
pleasure.
sharing today.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for attending.
Yes, thank you so much for attending.
Yeah.
Please don't forget to fill up the feedback form. Let me just share a bit.